This is the Rise Up See Red podcast, all about the Arizona Cardinals and the NFL, featuring insider and outsider perspectives. Enjoy the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Now here are your hosts, Jess Root and Seth Cox.
Welcome, Arizona Cardinals fans, to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. I'm your host, Jess Root from CardsWire.com, the USA Today NFL Wire site. My co-host, as always, is Seth Cox from RevengeOfTheBirds.com, SB Nation's Arizona Cardinals site, and this is episode 220. And this is going to be the first of three shows in a row that we're going to end up doing because we are on the edge of what is the busy part of the offseason. The combine is starting. Free agency is around the corner. The Cardinals are making moves. There's comp picks that have been awarded. So we've got some content to talk about, Seth. And so how excited are you that we are? It's not so much speculation or guesses or analysis. Without too long, we're going to have actual measurements and actual signings and releases, and we'll be getting ready for the draft here just in just around the corner, it feels like.
Yeah, it's a good time of year. It's the fun time of year where, I mean, for Cardinals and something we haven't really seen before is that first pick, that high speculation where they kind of control the beginning of the draft and I mean, obviously they've never had the first pick in their franchise history, and so that should make, the entire situation really enjoyable and fun to deal with and new. And so, you and I talked about it kind of last show when this Kyler Murray buzz started, and that's one of the things that, Cardinals fans seem not to like it, but really, I mean, embrace it. There's nothing more or nothing else that would be being talked about at this time if you're the Cardinals, if there wasn't talk about Kyler Murray, because they haven't met with prospects yet. They haven't, they haven't met at the combine. They haven't put out too many feelers in terms of trades. So a quarterback hasn't established himself as being worth, trade worthy. So the only reason there's this buzz, that there's this conversation about the Cardinals right now, is simply because Kyler Murray. And as much as that bothers some people, it is a reality of this offseason, and, just embrace it.
And the Cardinals are, as we can tell, they are more than willing to let the fire burn, because let's face it, this team was irrelevant. They were bad and unexciting last season. So let's have them talk about things for a few months until things happen and they do the boring thing and just draft Nick Bosa at the top of the draft and make their team better. But until then, I want all the Kyler Murray stories. I'm going to write about the fact that he's now up to over 200 pounds, that that Daniel Jeremiah doesn't have him as highly rated as a prospect as he had Josh Rosen a year ago, that he would like to play for Cliff Kingsbury, that Cliff Kingsbury didn't really back away from what he said, and the fact that he said he'd take him with the first pick in the draft, because, one of the comments he made recently was this: I'll just leave what I said is what I said and let people speculate. And so let's just do that. But what we got on tap for this show, guys, is on episode 220, is we're talking about compensatory picks. Those were awarded. There was another signing the Arizona Cardinals did. They added another player that another team dumped. And there are some possibilities on the horizon that the Cardinals could target. And then, of course, perhaps the part you might be expecting, might want to talk about and listen to most, we're going to do our combine preview, where we're going to talk about the players to watch, offense and defense, who needs to prove themselves, what can we learn from this combine. So let's kick things off with compensatory picks. The league every year announces 32 compensatory picks because of the formula of free agent gains and losses. This year, the Arizona Cardinals are tied for the most compensatory picks with 4. giving them a total of 11 total draft picks. They were awarded a 6th-round compensatory pick and 3 7th-round compensatory picks. So we all love 7th-round picks, including the very last pick in the draft, number 254, Mr. Irrelevant. And this has some Cardinals fans very excited. And if you're on our side of the ball when it comes to covering the Cardinals, this is the worst thing possible, because now that Saturday of day 3 of the draft, and I know people know no one really feels sorry for us, but it is a long Saturday if you have to wait from you get there early because the draft starts at 9 in the morning, and then you've got to wait till they make those last 3 picks and get on conference calls with the kids. Now that's the part's fun. Get on the conference calls with the kids, then wait for Steve Keim and Cliff Kingsbury to come out for their presser. And because they had the last pick in the draft, they're going to be later than other people, and they're going to want to cut it short because they're going to be want to be on the horn signing guys to undrafted deals. So while it gives them a lot of picks and a lot of capital, it's not a lot of worthwhile capital, is it?
No, it's not, and it is what it is at this point. You and I, selfishly, and for the team too, because something we'll both write about for our sites is like the reality of what would you think? More than 6 of these picks making the roster this year is probably slim.
And we'll put it this way. With 11 picks of the draft, if they use every single pick and every single one of those players makes the roster, that means they probably have a garbage roster.
Right. And that's kind of what we were saying is like, so our hope is that they make, maybe 2 trades, maybe use the, a 7th, now that you can trade compensatory picks. Oh my gosh, could you imagine if you couldn't? And we'd definitely be stuck there all day. But you could get, you could maybe trade a 7th and a 6th, and maybe you grab a Case Keenum, and restructure his contract and release a Mike Glennon, and then maybe you pick up an older veteran offensive lineman or defensive lineman that's got no dead money that you'll incur for this type of thing, and you can get rid of maybe 3 of those and just go in with 8. Wouldn't that would be something? Because then you get 2 bodies that are likely to make the roster, and then hopefully, one, then maybe you strike hot with one of those guys. So it's just, that's the issue with when you're picking I like to say post 120. After 120, it really becomes more of a crapshoot than anything else you can expect. For every Andre Ellington, you get, Chris Campbell. For every, who's the Rudy Ford, you end up with a Dorian Johnson. So I mean, it's just,
and even Dorian Johnson was a top 120.
Yeah. So I mean, just as soon as you get into that, post 120 range, it's more of a coin flip than it is anything else that they even are on the roster. And as you just said, I mean, with 11 picks, that would mean, you figure
6 of them around round 6 and 7.
Right. And you figure usually you've got at least 3 undrafted free agents that make the roster. And so if you're talking 14 rookies on this roster, like you said, that's for a 53-man roster to have, a quarter of it end up as rookies, it would not be the best for the team itself.
Well, and here's the thing for me. Aside from the selfish part of not wanting to have to deal with the last part of the draft, is let's just look at their history with the 6th and 7th rounds. I'll only do 2013 and beyond. The fact of the matter is, it's clear the Cardinals don't even really value 7th round picks to begin with, because since Steve Keim took over as general manager in 2013, he's only in 6 years drafted a player in the 7th round 3 times. He's traded those those picks go for, he uses them to get other players. He used a 7th-round pick to get Matt Barkley. He used a 7th-round pick to get Marcus Cooper. He used the next year's 7th-round pick to get Jamar Taylor a year ago. See, the 7th-round picks, they're kind of throwaways. And you know how many of those 7th-round picks actually made the roster? Well, we go back to 2013. That was tight end DC Jefferson. He made the roster and then was cut. Gerald Christian didn't make the roster. Corey Cunningham did make the roster. So one 7th-round pick that perhaps will do something in 6 years. Then you look at the 6th round, which has actually been a really bad round for the Cardinals, is since 2013, 2 6th-round picks have made the roster. So you had Andre Ellington in 2013. Ryan Swelp was drafted. He didn't make it out of the first week of practice before he retired. Walt Powell, cut. They didn't even have a 6th-round pick in 2015. Harlan Miller got cut. He bounced between the roster a little bit in 2016. 2017, Rudy Ford made the roster, and then Chris Campbell didn't even make it out of camp last year. So it's not like the Cardinals have a good history with those late picks. They just don't do them. I mean, you might as well. And so this is what I propose. In fact, Blake, for your side, he proposed that the Cardinals use those to trade for veterans. You know, I wrote, say, we don't draft players with those picks. Use them to maneuver in the draft and use them to acquire other players. You're going to have a better option. I mean, which would we rather have had last year? Now, I granted there was part salary. Who was worth more to the Cardinals last year? Jared Valdir or no one? Because what they got, they traded Jared Valdir for a 6th-round pick. And what they got was Christian Campbell. They actually would have been better off. They would have been better off trading him for a ham sandwich, because a ham sandwich would have made you satisfied for at least a meal. Chris Campbell didn't even make it out of camp.
Right. And you're exactly right. And that's the difficult part of it. And it makes the entire process a little difficult, because it's always fun to look at these things, but in reality, as you said, the reality just doesn't back it up. And then the other thing is this: people want to say, well, you know, trade down from the first pick and get more picks. Well, they have 11. And so if they were to trade down and get even like a first and a second, now all of a sudden they have 13. And at that point, you're just filling your roster with young players and inexperienced players. And I akin this to kind of the Phoenix Suns. The Suns have done a great job of hoarding picks, but they've never done a great job of using those picks to get a veteran to kind of be the guy in the mix, surrounded by all this young talent. And so sometimes, even when it's a lot of young talent, you still need a veteran presence. You still need kind of that calming influence. And you look at it, and it causes issues. And so I'm of the opinion that, yeah, the Cardinals need to get younger, but they also need to have, you know, some veteran. Like, you look at their offense, the only real veteran outside of, you know, Larry Fitzgerald is David Johnson, and he's in his 4th year. He'll be in his 5th year. I guess A.Q. Shipley, but is he even going to be on the roster? So it's going to be interesting.
Justin Pugh.
Oh yeah, for as many games as he's available. So, you know, at this point, it's start to fill out the roster a little more.
Yeah, and so you kind of look at what are some type of players that they might be able to get. We've already thrown out there Case Keenum. If you can redo his deal, if you could get him on the Mike Glennon deal, the fact that he's played for Cliff Kingsbury before, that's a perfect match. It's a perfect match. He's a capable backup. Like, in terms of high end, you know, what we've seen from Case Keenum, he can be a better starter than Mike Glennon has been. And he knows the system. That'd be a perfect one. I have a guy over at my Rams, over at the Rams Wire, who said there might be a couple of guys that the Cardinals could pick up for a 6th or 7th rounder. Tyler Higbee, a tight end, a young tight end that they have. They tried to trade him a year ago for a 6th round pick. They got an offer of a 7th from the Vikings. The Cardinals need tight ends. He's a capable blocker. He can make plays, and he's expendable in LA. You need the tight ends. You could add him to the group, or even linebacker Mark Barron. He's got a big cap hit for the Rams this year, but he's been a little bit banged up. But if there's no doubt he can be productive in the Cardinals defense, and he does have the size profile that Vance Joseph likes. And so, you kind of look around the league, try to find a guy that's in the last year of his deal, kind of has a big cap hit for that team, but it wouldn't nearly be as big a cap hit for the Cardinals because they don't have the dead money involved or the proration from the signing bonus. You kind of look for those guys because a 6th or 7th rounder, it's a coin flip at best, and you're getting a guy who hasn't yet proven that he can be an NFL player. And if you use a pick to acquire a player, because 7, 6, and 7 round picks, they might make the roster a year or two and before they flame out off times. So even if it's for a guy that isn't great, but at least has shown he deserves to be on an NFL roster, even for a year, maybe 2, I think, it makes more sense. I mean, you want to hit on a 6th or 7th rounder every once in a while because that does your team really good. So say like last year's 7th round pick, Corey Cunningham, he turns into a starter. Guess what? That is a very good thing for the team, but you can't count on it.
Yeah. And you look at things like, John Ross, he's now available. And could you package, 2 6th round picks for John Ross, who
was a former first rounder,
top 10 pick, and guy that just hasn't, probably needs a change of scenery. He's been injury prone. So, he's not going to cost anything. And like you said, he's not going to have any guaranteed money for the Cardinals. So, but he is obviously a talented guy. He's a guy that would make sense. And he's a wide receiver, which 100% addresses a need for the Arizona Cardinals.
So wrapping that up, let's talk about next as we come back on the next part of the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. The Cardinals made a roster move. They've added a tight end, so they picked up a 4th player before free agency to their roster. We're going to talk about Charles Clay. That's next on the Rise Up See Red podcast. We're back on the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. And the Cardinals, they in less than 2 weeks, they added 4 new players to their roster, and it didn't cost them anything other than the money. It won't hurt them in the compensatory formula next year. They added Tanner Vallejo and waivers. They signed Robert Alford, cornerback. They added Brooks Reed. And their next guy, Charles Clay, tight end, 8-year vet, between 2013 and 2017 averaged like 57 catches and over 700 yards. Last year was a bit of a disaster for him. He's on the wrong end of 30, but they pick him up, and when the initial terms of the deal, it says worth up to $3.25 million. I was like, oh, that's okay. He was due to make, I think, 4.5. So you're thinking, okay, but it actually is only a $2 million deal. He's got $315,000 in a signing bonus. His salary is going to take it to like $1.1 million. And then he can make up to $500,000 in roster bonuses per game on their per game active basis, which is the Cardinals do a lot. Almost all their contracts include, especially if there's any sort of durability concern, anywhere between $250,000 and $5 million will be tied into being active for game days. And then there's another $1.25 million that's just incentives. So this becomes actually a really cheap deal, basically a $2 million deal. $1.5 million deal that's hopefully $2 million, and it turns into $3.25 apparently if he's like amazing
for a desperate need.
Oh my gosh, yes. And so he's a guy, and now is he the savior of the tight end position? We thought Jermaine Gresham was, because he was coming off of his 5 seasons in Cincinnati. He was a 55 to 60 catch guy. And then his production tailed off in part because he was coming back from an injury. Bruce Arians had used the tight end. And then last year he was not used nearly as much. I don't know what to expect from Charles Clay because there's good and bad. Obviously, the production was there, but we saw that with Gresham before he came to the Cardinals. He's on the wrong end of 30. He's not been particularly durable. Like he missed some games last year. His production fell off the table. And so what do we get out of him? I don't know. What do you know about this Charles Clay guy? He seems to fit the type of free agent the Cardinals tend to be getting almost all the time.
Yeah, he's basically a move H-back at this point. I mean, guy that can line up at tight end or fullback. He's not really a blocker, though. I mean, it's not a strong suit. He's a guy that's going to be able to play in the slot a little bit if needed, flex out. He used to be kind of a matchup guy. Now, not so much with the injuries and kind of the age. But when you look at it, the biggest thing is that he gives the Cardinals a veteran presence. He's a guy that has been successful in the NFL, and he's a guy that you can trust. I mean, and here's the biggest thing when it comes to the signing of Clay is that as long as it doesn't end up like Gresham where they're going to, sign him to a long-term contract, kind of an asinine contract like they did Gresham, then it's basically there's no negatives to it. There's no down unless they use this as an excuse to not further address the position. But I mean,
right.
They've basically with Robert Alford and Brooks Reed, who we talked about last show, they've basically at this point continually added guys that can be starters, but they haven't really addressed any positions. And I'm not saying that in a negative way. They've basically said like, hey, look, we've got guys that are competent NFL starters. Oh, by the way, if we can draft a rookie or find another free agent that's better, we're going to do it. So, that's what I have actually liked about these signings as opposed to, signing a guy like Andre Smith or Sam Bradford or guys that you're like, huh? Like these guys haven't been good in years. Why are you signing them? Alfred had a down season, but in 2017 he was better than Marcus Trufant there in Atlanta, and Brooks Reed has been a consistent 45 to 60% snap guy over the last several years, and he for the Falcons, and Clay in 2 years ago was putting up over 500 yards, and he dealt with some injuries. He dealt with Josh Allen, so to see him fall off isn't exactly shocking. Now,
especially that Bills offense was nearly as bad as the Cardinals,
right? And so obviously they're gambling on Alford and Clay getting back, but it's a safe gamble. I mean, Alfred's a little more of a expensive gamble, but Clay, like you said, his cost is negligible. I mean, he literally won't cost the team anything in 2020, and that's really kind of all that matters, because this is a team. The Cardinals are kind of in a bridge year where they're trying to figure out a way to get to be successful, but also not completely, fall off the face of the earth like they did last season.
And what's interesting about this is when initially when I saw that they signed him, I said, "Oh, it seems inevitable. Jermaine Gresham's contract, they're going to get rid of him." And to me, the signs were already there as well, because he was a healthy, active scratch in week 17. So he didn't. They didn't inactivate them, but they didn't play him at all, which was really odd. That said, he's going to count $8.2 million against the cap this coming year. and he's gonna if you cut him, he's gonna leave more than he's gonna leave $5.75 million in dead money. So it's not like you're gonna gain a significant amount of cap space. And maybe they still do it, but I thought initially that Clay would end up getting, some Gresham money. But with what they could cut Gresham and it's a wash almost. It's almost basically a wash in terms of money. But maybe they keep them both because.
See, I think what they've done is they've set it up so they can have a post June 1 cut if they find a guy in free agency and or the draft. If they end up and we'll talk more about this.
No, that might be what they do is so they can cut him later.
If they end up with a Noah Fant available at 33 or an Irv Smith that they really like, this fits better. He's younger, healthy, blah, blah, blah. But if all those guys are gone and all of a sudden, the only tight end you are able to bring in is one of those 19 6th or 7th round picks. Obviously, maybe, let Jermaine and him battle it out. Cause at that point, what's the difference if he's in training camp?
Right.
Or not, post June 1's post June 1. It's not like it makes a difference. So, it makes sense what they're doing. They're trying to flood positions of need and make sure that they at least have able bodies there. Come game 1 of the 2019 season in the Cliff Kingsbury era. And I applaud them for that. And everybody knows I've been extremely hard on Steve Keim. And so I think when he does something intelligent and smart like this, where he puts them in a position to continue, to move forward and be aggressive at spots, I think he needs to be lauded for that as well.
And it's an interesting thing that they're doing this time because it's almost like they're, instead of waiting for those late additions at the beginning of training camp or right before training camp or even during training camp, that they're front loading those moves now to get talent in the door now because their roster is devoid of much talent. And I like what they're doing now, as long as if they're not trying to do it to avoid getting other players that'll cost more. Because ultimately, with the money situation, they have money in free agency to be able to go out and sign players that are good and pay them amount of money. If this is kind of going on the cheap because you can, and trying to hit on those veteran deals that Keim's had some success with, I don't want this to be what we do instead of going and adding a 1 or 2 impact players in free agency. I don't want to see that.
Yeah, as long as this isn't Andre Smith over again. That's kind of the whole thing. And real quick on Gresham as well. If you just look at the length plus the inability to get out of the contract, how many worse contracts has Steve Keim or any Arizona Cardinal had? Like, the craziest thing was you just couldn't cut him because there's so much dead money.
This year was the first year. When they signed the deal, we knew it. We talked about it on the show. He was no matter what, he was guaranteed through age 30. And even then, that third year is still you're still going to take a hit. You're not going to save a lot of money. It was like the Tyrann Mathieu deal. The Tyrann Mathieu deal became a bad deal because he wasn't a star.
Yeah, and so it's crazy to me that happened. But yeah, so they
love him. That's the thing. They love him. The front office loves him. The coaching staff loves him, and he is loved by, he was one of Carson Palmer's best friends. He hit it off really well. One of Josh Rosen's closest friends in the locker room as well. He is loved in that locker room, and he has a great reputation among the organization too.
Yep, he just hasn't been good on the field for 3 years. So
yeah, he's 31 years. He's going to be 31 when he plays this year. They should say goodbye, but at the same time, Charles Clay, he offers some leadership and mentorship for a younger guy like a Darrell Daniels if they want to keep a looking at him, the guy they picked up off waivers from the Seahawks, Ricky Seals-Jones. But yeah, that'd be interesting to see what happens that if they're going to add another type player, tight end in free agency, or if there's something to do in the draft. Because we don't know how important that position is going to be for Cliff Kingsbury, though we have seen that he has had excessive success with a tight end, because Jason Morrow that last year of college was, oh my gosh, one of the most productive players in college. So we know that he can use a tight end. Maybe Ricky Seals-Jones that guy. Maybe Charles Clay's that guy. Or maybe they don't need. Maybe it's not a position of value for them.
Right.
We'll
and so just, like I said, I appreciate them going out, getting somebody that's had production, that's, that fits kind of the mold of the H-back, move back, that, move tight end that he is. And I think you go from there.
Clay isn't the only. We talked about that. That's one of 3 pre-free agent signings because of guys that have been cut. Who are some other guys? That's what we're going to talk about next on the Rise of C-Red podcast. Are there potentially any other players the Cardinals can add before free agency begins? That's coming on next on Rise of C-Red. We're back on the Rise of C-Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. We've talked about how they added Tanner Vallejo, they added Robert Alford, they added Brooks Reed, now they've added Charles Clay. Who are some other guys that could be there? Because there's some names out there that maybe the Cardinals could add. And let's talk about one that actually hit the market yesterday, and that's former Baltimore Ravens and San Francisco 49ers receiver Michael Crabtree. He's now available. The Cardinals have a needed receiver. Seems like it'd be a good match, wouldn't it?
Yeah, did you see that? I don't think it was a tweet, but maybe he talked about it on the radio. Gambo today talking about that there's no way they would sign Crabtree. I was wondering what that was about. Was Crabtree was before Kingsbury was at Texas Tech, right?
Oh.
Like that, I just didn't know. And so I don't even remember when Crabtree was there, to be completely honest. But yeah, I mean, you look at Crabtree, a guy like Josh Sitton, there are guys that fit what they need. Yeah, it was before.
Yeah, it was even before he was at Houston.
Yeah, so I was just curious because that was kind of an odd comment, I thought, from Gambo to come out and say like they never have any interest or something.
Which is now granted, Crabtree is definitely not what he used, and he never became. I guess he never became the guy. He was kind of like Michael Floyd, only he's a far more productive player than Michael Floyd ever was. He just was a disappointment. But here's the thing: he had a really down year. In fact, the last 2 years, he's in the wrong end of 30. He's on the wrong side of 30. But like the last 2 years, which have been down years. Now it's not like they were paying a lot. So he signed a 3-year deal for $21 million with the Ravens. He had 54 catches and 600 something yards. That was a bad year for him, and they cut him. Now let's put that in perspective. The numbers for receptions, for yards, and for touchdowns would have put him second on the Cardinals, and that was a bad year.
Yeah, and I mean he's be 30. He's in his NFL age 32, so he's been around forever. Like you said, he's a productive player. He's a guy that basically is going to get you 50 catches and 600 yards a year. He's never had outside of a injury plague.
He's had 2,000 yard years.
Yeah, and outside of an injury plagued, 2013, his lowest amount of catches in a season was 48 as a rookie.
That was a rookie. Yep.
Yeah, and then last year, like you said, 607 was the least amount of yards he's had. And again, that was outside of the 2013 season. So you're talking about a guy that, is just consistent. I mean, he's a grinder at this point in his career. He's a guy that, is going to drop some passes. That's always kind of been his bugaboo since he came into the league. And so,
but Jim Harbaugh said he has the best hands in football, didn't he?
So when you look at it, it would make sense if just to at least, kick the tires on it. But the question you always ask with guys like Crabtree is, would they want to come play for this team in this situation that the Cardinals are in right now.
That is true. Now, on the flip side, if they believe in the type of offense they're going to do, I think a receiver might be willing to come here because the numbers could be there. The numbers could be there. Now, the question is he wants to win. He wants to win. He's 31. He doesn't want to play for a bad team. But if the opportunities with winning teams aren't there, if he wants to play, that's the opportunity. So I don't see a problem with signing him. I don't think he moves the dial for most people who follow the Cardinals. And especially when if you have the choice between acquiring Michael Crabtree or Antonio Brown, granted the cost is very different. Clearly, Antonio Brown is a much, 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 much better option.
Even though they're basically the same age, that's the other crazy thing.
Yeah. But how bad is a trio of Larry Fitzgerald, Michael Crabtree, and Christian Kirk? That's okay. That's not bad.
And it fits kind of the passing style that is the air raid. They still have to go get somebody else, but they're going to have to do that whether or not they bring in Michael Crabtree or not. So, that's the crazy thing. Even if they were to bring in Antonio Brown, do you really want to sit there with just Antonio Fitz and Christian Kirk, or do you hope that they bring in somebody else? So that's where they're at right now. I would think that they're going to bring in at least one guy in free agency, and then who knows in the draft.
Now, a guy that you brought up that I ran across yesterday on Monday. I ran across it on Monday. A story saying that Miami Dolphins left guard Josh Sitton expects to be released. Sitton only played in one game last year, but wouldn't he make a nice fit for the Cardinals for a number of reasons? One, he's been a really good guard. And he's again on the wrong side of 30, but he's been a really good guard. Now he's had some durability issues. I don't think he's played in 16 games in a season in a few years. I think it's been 4 years. But outside of last year when he was placed on IR after one game, he never missed more than 3. So it wasn't like Justin Pugh, Andre Smith missing time type of things. But the Cardinals need a left guard. Or they need a right guard. Justin Pugh might. I don't know what they want to do with Justin Pugh.
Multiple interior linemen.
Right. So you need a guard. If you want to do it right guard, you can put Josh Sitton in right at left guard, and then you've got your guards potentially are taken care of as the starters, but you don't have to pay Sitton. You don't have to pay gobs. Maybe you don't have to pay gobs of money, and you could still draft a guy to play by November if something happens or next year, because you're already paying Pugh a lot of money and you can't get rid of him for another 2 years at least anyway. So I think that might not be a bad fit, assuming he's healthy. In my opinion, that it seems like a winner. And if anything else, he fits the profile of a Steve Keim's offensive line signing.
Yeah. And again, as long as it's cheap and it doesn't preclude them from addressing it in the draft. The thing is, and this is kind of something that, I don't know, I think maybe you and I haven't done a great job of talking about, and we probably will later, but, the reality becomes they have so many holes to fill on the team that they're going to have to risk signings or whatever you want to say. They're going to have to sign some of these guys, some of these Sittons, these Crabtrees. They're going to have to sign these established NFL guys like Charles Clay to fill out the roster, because they're just not. They just don't have very much talent. And so as much as it's a pain in the butt, it's easier to bank on a guy like Josh Sitton than it is to draft 11 rookies and hope that they turn it on this year. So,
or even AQ Shipley comes back, you push him back into the starting job at center, and you move Mason Cole to guard, where he might be able to play, but it's not like he even played it in college because he played center and left tackle.
Right. And so the whole situation, it ends up just coming down to the fact that they're going to have to continue to push guys out. They're going to have to continue to look for guys and find guys and see if they can, if they can fill out a roster. And so, yeah, they're going to have to sign some older, broken down guys to go along with the young guys that they kind of mesh together. And they're going to have to hope that they get not only production, but guys that are able to stay on the field for a full season. And so it's not ideal at this point, but because they lack so much talent, they don't really have a choice.
and you brought up the guy, John Ross, former first-round pick for the Cincinnati Bengals, super, record speed at the NFL Combine, injuries, lack of production. What does he have? Like 7 catches, 21 catches in 3 years, something like that. And now he's on the trading block. What would he be worth? And would we be worth acquiring? It's obviously a position of need. He would give the Cardinals a true speedster who could definitely replace J.J. Nelson with, I would most certainly think that he has a higher ceiling than J.J. Nelson.
Oh, yeah, and he's a guy that, if he's able to stay healthy, but when you're kind of shallow on talent for the time being and you're going to try to restock it, you're going to have to take those chances. And a guy like John Ross makes a lot of sense. You give them 2 6-round picks, or you give them a 6th and a 5th or 4th round in 2020, depending on playing time, or, even can convert to or probably like a 6th that converts to a 5th or a 4th. That's the type of deal you make for him. Obviously, you're not giving up anything of what's the word I'm looking for? that's worth anything really. But in the same sentence, you've got to find a way to kind of stack this roster with talent, because they just don't have much. So if they're going to compete, if they're going to start to trend in the right direction, it starts now, or it probably will take a lot longer than a lot of us are hoping.
And are there any other players that you think? I haven't come across any other names, but I'm sure there's going to be other guys. Are there any other positions that you'd like to see the Cardinals kind of throw the cut player at? A receiver would be nice. An offensive lineman would be nice.
Yeah, I mean, an offensive lineman's always kind of the key, right? I mean, we'd always like to see an offensive lineman, but I think when it comes down to it, you'd like to see
a kicker. You could do a kicker.
I think realistically, you'd like to see a wide receiver, because those are hard to find. I think trading for a wide receiver, whether it be Antonio Brown or John Ross, or signing a Michael Crabtree, just again, you're talking about a guy that could potentially be the 3rd guy. Obviously, if you get Antonio Brown, he's your one with a bullet, but a John Ross or a Michael Crabtree as your 3, and then you bring in a rookie, that's a lot better than a rookie as your 3, and you're just hoping that fits and can give you something again, and that Christian Kirk can stay healthy and grow for another year.
And with that, we'll wrap up this segment of the Rise of Sea Red podcast, and when we come back, we'll talk about the part that probably you might or might not be the most interested in. That's we're going to talk combine. So there's going to be a lot more Seth, a little bit of me. That's coming up next on the Rise of Sea Red podcast, best hour of Cardinals talk on the web, Combine Talk. We're back on the Rise of Sea Red podcast for the last segment of the show. We're going to talk the Combine. the combine officially started on Tuesday, although nothing has happened yet. Kind of the good stuff kind of begins on Friday when we start getting the drills from the first, kind of like the second group. But what we want to talk about in this show is who are the players that have something to prove? Who are the players that Cardinals fans should pay attention to, both on offense and in defense? Obviously, there is intrigue because of the very top of the draft. I think number one, we both know we want to pay attention to Kyler Murray because, and it's not even for the drills. I think I want to see him do the 40. I hope he runs the 40 because I want to see exactly how fast this kid is. But I think what's going to come in even more important, because quarterbacks and throwing drills all do well. And it's the only time it's an issue is if they don't throw well against the wind. Against air, they're the air defending them. I want to see what his actual build is, because if he, I think the height is one thing. I think we've reached a point with Kyler Murray. If we know he's not 5'11", he's just plain short. If he's any shorter than 5'11", it doesn't really matter because we all know he's short. But how big is he? Is he the 205? Is he a soft 205? Is he a sustainable 205? Because if he has that bigger build, if you've got the short Russell Wilson but stacked build, you can withstand that what's going to happen at quarterback, as opposed to when you're worried about RG3 or maybe Teddy Bridgewater's frame or Lamar Jackson's frame that raise concerns. Is Murray a guy that you're going to pay attention to in particular? I want to watch the drills, but I'm really more concerned about the measurement.
Did you see his over under on his 40s, like 4.38?
That's ridiculous.
That's like elite wide receiver numbers. That's unheard of.
He would be almost the perfect Bruce Arians receiver.
Exactly. And so, that's going to be really interesting. I'm very interested to see what, obviously Nick Bosa looks like, because we haven't seen him in 8 months. So,
right.
Like, how serious is he taking his rehab? Is he going to come in and be soft, or is he going to come in and look like a guy that's wanting to be the first overall pick? I'm interested in Josh Allen because people I talk to that I trust have told me that they really think that he's going to test kind of like Jadeveon Clowney. And for those of you that kind of don't follow the draft or the kind of nuances, Clowney's 40 was absolutely ridiculous, but the rest of his numbers were kind of pedestrian. And so is he going to be closer to Myles Garrett, or is he going to be closer to Clowney, where he's a straight line athlete and maybe not the, a guy that's got the bend and the dip and the things of that nature. And then, you made a comment about Murray and what he's going to look like if he's 205. Is he going to be kind of a rocked up 205, or is he going to be soft? The other guy that I'm really interested in terms of build is Quinnen Williams, a guy that a lot, I would say from what I gather, and you can tell me what you gather, but I would say 50% of the fan base is comfortable with Nick Bosa. I would say 25% of the fan base is comfortable with Quinnen Williams. I would say about 20% of the fan base is comfortable with the idea of trading down, and then the last 5% is either Josh Allen or Kyler Murray at one. So when you look at a guy like Williams, he's 295, I believe, but he kind of, he was kind of a doughy 295 at Alabama. And so, what's his weight? What does he look like? How's he preparing and coming into this whole situation? He's somebody I'm going to be kind of watching, like you said, because I want to see what his build looks like as he comes into the process.
And for me, the Bosa Allen thing is most interesting to me because Nick, I mean, when his brother Joey, if I recall correctly, they didn't anticipate him testing particularly well for his size.
Right.
And then he tested a little better than expected, which was really good for him. But even still, he fell a little bit.
Right. And he tested and kind of, he was kind of the anti-Clowney when you look at the testing numbers. Like I said, Clowney was incredibly fast in terms of his linear stuff, but when it got to his 20-yard shuffle and his 3-cone, it wasn't as great. Now, Clowney was explosive in his jumps too, which is really great. But when you look at Bosa, his numbers in his 3-cone and his 20, and even his broad jump were like huge numbers. They were like elite numbers. His 3-cone, I think, was faster than like a bunch of wide receivers that year.
Wow.
So like his obviously short area change of direction was, to say elite would be understating it. So that'll be the biggest thing for him. So when you have that, Nick is supposed to be a better athlete, so we'll see if that's true, obviously. And then, like you said, the Josh Allen thing, like he looks like a souped up athlete, right? Like he looks like a sports car.
Yeah. And then that's the thing with the Cardinals. That athleticism, because they've already talked about how they want someone at the top of the draft and I'm kind of interesting is if you have someone who's athletic and more proven production, and you have someone who's at a little bit higher level athletically, which do they view more? Because I could totally, based on what we've seen from Steve Keim before, I could totally see them falling in love with the Josh Allen. And that's not to say he's going to be a bad player, but like you talked about before, the one thing you look at, you've got the athleticism, but you have just this 1 year just bump in production. He wasn't bad before, but it was just one huge year of production. And Nick Bosa, you've seen while there's been some time missed, he's been impactful every year. I'm really intrigued to see, because will Bosa test athletic enough for the Cardinals to say he's worth the first pick? Because I know what they're looking for is an elite athlete as well.
Yeah, and so the whole situation is going to come down to who checks off all the boxes, and like you said, Allen's a senior, which is always a big thing for Keim, and then he put up that huge year this year in terms of production, and so from there, you're going to have to look at Bosa and the fact that he's kind of been the guy from the start, whether it's, since he was a freshman, and put up those kind of elite pro football focus type numbers in terms of pass rush productivity and hurries and quarterback hits and things of that nature. And like you said, Allen, he wasn't bad before, but he wasn't even in the same conversation as Nick Bosa when the year started. So, is it 1 year of high productivity, but you also saw the growth, or is it a guy that has been on the cusp of being an elite talent for the last 3 years and just hasn't broken through partially because of playing time, and then obviously this year he was on his way to being an All-American and elite player. Through the 3 games he put up really great numbers and then got hurt. So we'll see. We'll see how it all breaks down. I think the other thing we're gonna find out is if teams are going to be willing to move up, and I've don't know if I've said it on the show, but I've told you personally, like, the scuttlebutt from Senior Bowl week was that Cardinals set an astronomical price for the first overall pick, and they basically are telling teams like, hey, you want the first pick, blow us away. Don't come in with an offer that's like, oh, we'll give you the 4th pick and the 27th pick. Like, I've seen a lot of people come off with that and think that that's going to get done. Like, what I've heard is that the starting price is 3 first-round picks. So again, it doesn't have to be 3 this year, so it doesn't have to be just the Raiders. But are you talking about, 1 this year, 1 next year, and 1 in 2021? So that's what the conversation becomes.
And for me, I'm also interested, and I wrote a piece on this for Cards Wire. There were 6 different players that I think the Cardinals fans should kind of pay attention to. We've already talked about some of them: Josh Allen, Nick Bosa, Kyler Murray fit that bill. I'm also interested in paying attention to, and I think Cardinals fans are going to be super interested in N'Keal Harry, a guy that's maybe a first rounder, probably not. But local kid, was great in high school, great at Arizona State. Obviously, the local kids, the ASU talents, when they're good, they get a lot of attention here. But we want to see how he tests in terms of speed and vertical, because we know he's got the body type, we know he's got the strength, and we know he had the on-field production. Now, for me personally, some of the on-field IQ wasn't always there, but in the type of offense that he was in and his usage last year, he could have even been better, but they also didn't target him. But I want to see, because like one of the things that's biggest concern about him is just how fast is he? Is he going to be a 4.5 guy? Is he going to be a sub 4.5 guy? Is he going to be a 4.6 guy? That will kind of determine what he's worth and whether he's going to be around come number 33, or whether he'd even be worth number 33 for the Cardinals.
Harry's a guy that is crazy to me, the variance that we've seen from him in terms of what people think. So, like,
he's your wide receiver 1, isn't he?
Yeah, and in terms of wide receiver 1, I would say him and Marquise Brown from Oklahoma, who won't be participating because, of course, he's got a Liz Frank injury. Because why have nice things, But
that scares me about him, because a foot injury and a receiver. Ugh.
It's John Brown all over again, or John Ross all over again. Sorry, but when you look at it, you kind of hit it with Harry. Is I'm interested in his straight line speed, but for him, I'm more interested in what he puts up the rest of the way, because we've been seeing some crazy alleged numbers coming out of his camp. I don't know if you've been paying attention, but I have. And you've seen things like a 42-inch vertical, which is insane.
What was it, like the 25 reps of 225 that we run across?
Yeah, and I think there was one more, and I can't find it right now. I texted to somebody, but he's he's looking in these training videos like he's got some juice in him. So I like him. I think he's going to be a really good player. I think he's on, I've said before, I think he's on that Alshon Jeffrey to Mike Evans spectrum in terms of who he is as a player. But it's crazy to me to see the variance in how people think of him, because I've seen guys that are like, he's clear-cut number 1. Like, I don't even know why this is a conversation to be had. And then I've seen guys that have said, like, I wouldn't touch him. He's wide receiver 9 or 10. It's crazy to me that a guy that's productive and then the size he is, and I'm not saying he has to be the first wide receiver taken. I'm not saying that at all. But it's crazy to me to see the variance in what people think of him as a player.
In terms of other types of players, I'm kind of on the offensive side of the ball. Who are some guys that have something to prove and who might be of intrigue to the Cardinals. Obviously, when we talk about like the offensive lineman, that's a really hard thing to do. Although the 40 time does tend to be a pretty good predictor of the type of player he could be. Has it not proven over time?
Yeah, 40 time, and then their 3 cone is important because can they move? Justin Higdon had like I believe it was anything that was over an 8 3 cone, they were out. I have to look at Dorian Johnson because whatever Dorian Johnson ran
was bad.
Right. But there was Justin had a cutoff of like if his shuttle or no, his 3 cone time, yeah, it was 8.39, and I think he said anything over 7.8 is like a death knell in terms of offensive line ability. So, if you see anything over 7.8, or maybe it's 7.9, but I can't remember off the top of my head, it's he's not going to be able to play. So a guy like Dalton Risner, Titus Howard from Alabama State, Andre Dillard, those are all guys. Yadni Kajus, those are all guys. Arm length is another big one in that terms because are they going to have the length to kind of play tackle, or are they going to have to move inside to guard? I'm interested in I talked about the tight ends earlier. TJ Hawkinson is getting all the pub, but I think Noah Fant's better personally. That's just me, the other Iowa tight end. But then you have Irv Smith, who looks like he can be an outstanding player, Alabama tight end. So when you look at it from those angles, like that's what the question becomes is, what do they want in terms of athleticism and ability, and how do they fit in with Kingsbury? Because that's just flat out what we don't know right now is who fits.
That's the new thing, especially on the offensive line, because you've got the Kingsbury ideas, but you've paired him with kind of an old school offensive line guy in Sean Kugler. How are they going to marry these two ideas together for the type of lineman they want?
Yeah, so I mean, all those things are going to be really interesting to watch move forward and how that comes out. That's on the offensive side of the ball. On the defensive side of the ball, you can kind of get the idea for Vance Joseph guys, right? Like you can kind of look at the archetypes from Denver, but there's only 2 years there. But we know, I mean, that's why you and I feel Josh Allen or Nick Bosa are going to be the first pick, because of what he's kind of stated on Big Red Rage and in interviews about how he believes in building his defense. And that consists of those edge players and then boundary corners or outside cornerbacks being the kind of elite teeth of the defense, so to speak. So when you look at it from that perspective, I'm looking at corners that fit, that fit with what we've seen from Vance Joseph corners in the past. I think, guys like Xavier Howard when he was in Miami, and then Bradley Roby in Denver. Those are names that kind of fit. So who comes in on those type of same profiles? I would be completely dumbfounded if they drafted another safety. But I'm not to say it won't happen, but I'd be really surprised. And I know that they've only got Swearinger for a year, and everything, but you also have to assume that they're going to keep Antoine Bethea at this point, at least for the year as well. So, they probably, can they invest in another safety right now? I don't know. So, and then the linebackers, are we going to kind of see a return to the more traditional linebacker build and types? Are we going to see a return to kind of the Kevin Minter types, or are we going to continue to see undersized guys. A guy that I absolutely love, and I know it would seem crazy, but he's a true, off-ball inside backer in a 34 from Michigan would be Devin Bush out of Michigan. So his measurements are gonna flabbergast people, because I don't think he's gonna be over 6 feet tall, and I'd be surprised if he was over 230 pounds. So he's gonna have to absolutely move to really lock up that top 45 pick. But that guy is a complete stud in terms of playmaking on the field while at Michigan. So, how he tests, I think, is going to be big.
Anybody else Ed Oliver is a guy that people are talking about, because Daniel Jeremiah said on his conference call, no one's quite sure what to do with him. Is he going to be? He's a little undersized to play the nose. Some say he thinks he might even play off the edge as an oversized edge player, or is he just a straight 3 technique? Is he a 5 technique? What is he going to have to show at the combine? Because we suppose his athleticism is going to be off the charts. And is he going to be? Could he be in the same kind of category as Aaron Donald in terms of how his performance on the combine?
See, it's so crazy to me that everybody loves Quinnen Williams. And I'm not saying Quinnen Williams is bad, by the way. I think Quinnen Williams is a top 10 player in this draft with a bullet. But I've always thought that if you were looking for that next, Aaron Donald, and you're not going to find him, first off. Like, it's just not going to happen. But if you're looking for that guy, wouldn't it be someone more similar to Ed Oliver? Kind of like you said, the tweener, an undersized guy that nobody really knows what to do with. That makes more sense than this guy that is basically the picture perfect defensive lineman, and Quinnen Williams at 6'5" and 290. So we'll see. We'll see how Oliver measures. We've seen crazy things like, who was it, Lance Zierlein, or was it Doug Farrar? I can't even remember. That was saying he should be moved to off-ball linebacker. So
yes. What? No. Okay, that's crazy.
So that's the whole thing. Is when people don't fit into the box that the NFL expects them to, they start to get weird. And I would even say that that Kyler Murray kind of fits into that. You talked about it. Like, if they're under 6 feet, basically the NFL goes, I don't know. Like, that's basically their response. And so, at the same time, you just say, all right, well, let's figure it out and kind of go from there. And so we'll see how that turns out. Cause I think there's a lot of talented football players this year. It's just, there's a lot of question marks. We brought up 3, Kyler Murray, Ed Oliver, and Devin Bush, that would all, that you could all make, outside of Murray, you could make a strong case for that they'd be good fits in Arizona. And even Murray, you could make a case for. So, all of that, I think, kind of just plays into the, pay attention, see how these numbers come back, and then let's make a more informed decision after that.
When we come back next week, unless there's something staggering from the combine to talk about or other news, I think what we're going to focus on our next show, we will focus on the Cardinals team needs. And we won't talk about only free agency, but we'll talk about the positions like we've done in years past. What do they need to do at different positions? Do they need to add someone in free agency or the draft, or maybe both? Then after that, we will do our free agency preview, in which we kind of, once we know what the Cardinals are looking like in the pre-free agent period, we will talk about actual players and contracts and stuff like that. So we should have a show definitely the next 2 weeks in a row, maybe 3 weeks, depends on what happens at the beginning of free agency. So with that, that wraps up this edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast. Thanks for listening. That's Seth Cox. I'm Jess Root. We'll be back again next week.
Thanks for listening to the latest edition of the Rise Up, See Red podcast. Listen to previous episodes and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Audioboom, or many other podcast platforms so shows are delivered directly to your mobile device. Please give the show a 5-star rating and always support the sponsors who support the show. We'll be back soon for the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Rise up, Red Sea, be Red, See Red, and of course, Rise Up, See Red.
Roll!